So yes, ready to start recording. That over with. And we do have a quorum, which is great, quorum of the committee, so we can vote on whatever we want. But the first item is the minutes.
I have two small amendments. Is it appropriate to offer them?
Sure.
Okay, on the where it says 5 Portsmouth CAP planning meeting under Bill Lyons, if we could add below bike and pedestrian plan, expand public transit. Because we did spend a fair amount of time on that, and the bike and pedestrian plan is underway and has a lot of support to it already, and I think that expand public transit has a lot of potential for us to be advising on. Then the second under C, item 4, where it says include positive examples demonstrating the impact of the Portsmouth CAP. I'm afraid the impact of the Portsmouth CAP is potential, so I would like to insert the word potential, the potential impact of the Portsmouth CAP. So those.
How about anticipated?
It's a different word.
Yeah.
Anticipated means we think it's going to happen. Potential means there's a possibility. I think anticipated is what we'd like to make happen, but I think that to go from potential to anticipated will take some advising and effort.
What do you think, Peter?
I think I'm fine with either.
Your amendment, Bill.
Okay. I'll say with potential, if
Okay.
you don't, with due respect.
Other changes or corrections? I think for future minutes, we should note if someone's attending by Zoom. So Maxim, I think, was attending by Zoom the last meeting. And we could just put it in parentheses or whatever, but that affects counting the quorum, so it's important we note that. And then the sustainability fair, so under number 7 was April 11th, not 7th. So that's a change. And then I thought the city council presentation, I didn't know that we had agreed on a PowerPoint presentation. I remember Josh presented options that we could present we could hand in a written report or have the slides in the packet and be there for questions, or we could do a presentation. So I'd like to talk more about that tonight. But if we could make it more general, rather than saying committee agrees, I don't think there was any vote or anything. I don't know, the presentation was discussed, or take that letter B out.
I'm okay with that, to say
Yeah.
that,
Take out letter B?
yeah.
Good. Great.
I move to accept the minutes as amended.
Seconded?
All in favor?
All right.
Hey.
Great. So the large portion of our meeting today, we're going to be talking about the Portsmouth Climate Action Plan. And you got a few attachments in the email with the agenda. So Jess is going to lead this item.
So we started to talk about this last month. And one of the attachments that you received were those PowerPoint slides that Effie and I went through last time. Which we just wanted to touch base again because for me, it just helps to keep us framed in what our role is as we move forward and help us think about how we take action or what next steps are on some of the actions. So I'm not going to go through all of them, but I think it's worth just, our role is to advise and guide on how the CAP is implemented and the renewable energy policy, and try to provide information and support environmental justice and protect the ecosystem. And so, I know there was some thought about voting about priorities and which of the items that people expressed interest in would be picked. I'm not I think that there may be opportunity to act on more of them, or we think, as we have this conversation and kind of discuss and look through what each item might look like and how it might work for the role that we take. So I would, that's part of the purpose, is just to begin the discussion for the committee about what are we following up on? What are we focusing on? Sort of what can we take steps to create action on? So when we have this conversation again next year, we can say, oh, we accomplished X, Y, and Z, or we worked towards this, or wherever we kind of land as we look through each of the items that people brought up as priorities for them. So, do you want to say anything about the PowerPoint further before we move on to them?
Sure, on slide 3. One thing I wanted to talk about is the third bullet there. For us to set things up to look back in March of next year and see what we've accomplished, to be able to report to the city council. This is what we've done. So we're future thinking what we want to be able to say at that point. And Kate brought up a good point at the last meeting that we really need to make our criteria explicit and to give our work credibility with the city council and the city staff. So I tried to make that more explicit on the chart.
A question. When we say we, do we mean what this committee has done, or do we mean what the city has done, including the council with this committee as advisor? Because I don't think the burden of implementing the cap is on us, but we can commit to be doing some things in our role as advisors.
Right, exactly. And that's why Jess started with the roles of this committee, that we are advising and guiding about the cap. We are not finishing these actions single-handedly. And the chart that you saw in the email, most of the committee actions will not be completed by this committee. We're guiding it, moving it along, suggesting actions for the council. Does that answer your question, Bill?
Yeah, I mean, there's an implementing role for us as advisors, but it's a collaborative
Mhm.
role. And I assume, like with the council and the city staff as well, that Kate and Peter have a role in implementing the cap, and we're support for that. Does that sound?
If we,
Yeah, but I
if-
would, the way the cap was divided, it's the city and the community too, so I
Yeah.
wouldn't leave that out either.
Right, right.
If we go to slide 6, it might be helpful following on Bill's question, cap roles for this committee. So one role, I talked briefly with Nancy Noveline Clayberg about electrifying school bus fleet. And she said she would talk to the superintendent and see what had happened so far. That kind of research is an important role for this committee. And she will bring that back to the committee, and then we'll all be current on where that's at. Or Josh asking for a report back about the stormwater utility fee. That's the kind of thing we want to be current about. The second thing is something we did last year, making proposals to the capital improvement plan related to the cap, specific things that we need and we think are priority. Recommendations to the city council. I've got one in mind, but I'm going to save it for later. Tracking and supporting efforts already in progress by others on cap actions. Bill, here I was thinking of a lot of the bike pedestrian work that's going on. We as a committee don't need to lead that.
No.
However, I think we would do well to have that tracked by you and hear every month how it's going, if you need us.
And I would broaden that to include other city plans and policies, because besides that, there's things like affordable housing
Yeah,
and
Right.
the bike ped plan. I mean, the master plan will be quite important, but there are other
yeah,
things.
that was just an example of
Right.
work going on. Zoning amendments is a possibility for this committee to look at. There's a few that have come up. There's a new master plan being put out. I believe a consultant team was chosen.
Yeah,
but
it's already underway. Yep.
Yeah, it's chosen or the choosing is underway?
No, it was a contract with the
Oh, good,
consulting team, yeah.
great.
You'd
So
still,
we,
they're called.
we all as a committee want to be part of that discussion and make sure that the climate action plan is an important part of the city's master plan. Outreach to the community. I think Colleen brought this up at the last meeting,
Mhm.
how important that was. And Peter, your comment about the community role in all this.
They get them involved and engaged, yeah.
Yeah. And then working with the planning department to promote use of bright action. Those are just things I thought of. Now, this group can think of other things and add to the list. And I do want to acknowledge the volunteers that attend a lot of the meetings because they can play a role in this as well.
So based on that, I think next steps would be that we could look through each of the draft ideas that we've come up with that Effie mapped out. But sort of in line with what Effie was saying, so for I can take the lead on the zero waste plan and talk about that piece and how I've initially thought about that. Ray and I are gonna meet to talk soon further. But one of those is the creation of a zero waste plan. So that's not really within the scope of this committee. However, as Effie talked about, we can do some research to find out what other cities have done for zero waste plans, you know, find out if they had consultants, what did that cost, what did the plans look like, what did they include, gather some information similar to what we did with the CAP. And then report back to this committee and discuss, maybe that's an item that we submit this year for the CIP to be considered, that the council thinks about putting money aside to have a consultant come in and do a zero waste plan for the city. And that's something that, you know, would be in the scope of this committee, doing that research, offering that guidance, that recommendation. The other piece of that is the promotion of household and restaurant activities to reduce plastic waste and waste in general. So I've already reached out to Kristen at the health department because they are the ones who are working on the skip the stuff piece. She and I are gonna talk a little bit more. One of the things that she mentioned to me initially was that community engagement and education is really a piece for them that they're trying to figure out. So maybe that is something that we can help support and talk with her about, and how can the committee help to support those efforts. And even just, Josh, I want to have another conversation with you a little bit more about the history of the plastic bag ban and all those kinds of things, to make sure that this entire committee is clear about where we've been and what we've, you know, the history of what we've tried to do to this point, so we can see how we move forward most effectively and what our next steps. Does that all make sense and reasonable? So I don't think Effie and I had any intention that we necessarily need to vote or knock off any of these things on the list, but what it might be helpful to is to just look at each one and kind of collectively come to some consensus about what our role is for that piece and who is taking the lead on that role. And then, you know, some might already be happening, some might not be such a priority if there's minimal or no interest in them. And we can kind of just weed through where we're moving forward in that way. Any other thing you'd want to add?
Well, I was hoping that Tori and or Nancy would be here this month so that they could throw their hat in the ring, so to speak. And I also wanted to mention volunteers, you know, if there's something that interests you. I'm sorry, you're the only.
I'm with Bill. Yeah.
Right.
Bottom of the table, you could add
Yeah.
Tyler.
Yeah, that's fine.
So as Jess said, I thought if we could go through this list and look at things and decide, is this research? Is it tracking we're going to do on this? Can we elevate it to start work on a capital improvement plan proposal? Because that'll give us an idea of how much we can take on and how much we should just say too much. Great.
I think that the combination of the roles, the first cut at the list, which reflects the first expression of interest of committee members, and then introducing the criteria across the top, I think fit together quite well. One thing that I would add to it, and I think it was in the notes from last meeting, is the importance of identifying the connectivity between the different activities, because we don't,
Between what?
between the different recommendations, that
Oh,
it's important to find a whole that's greater than the sum of the parts. If you're just looking at lots of little pieces, it will be much harder to get progress. So for example, on the transportation ones, ideally, those should all be part of a more systematic approach to providing alternatives to single vehicle driving, that walking and biking connects you to transit. Walking and biking and transit connects you to CNJ.
right.
That then gets the car off the highway commuting to Boston.
And that reminds me, another thing is, in this spreadsheet, the CAP action description is really abbreviated. It would be good to look at this in conjunction with the actual climate action plan, so you see the whole action.
And on the bottom one, that's not quite showing, the bottom where it says micro transit, I think that's evolved into micro transit / shuttle loop, which is what's in the CIP. And I think that was always what we advocates were hoping would be put into the CAP, but I think it sort of fell by the wayside, but that's what
Right, okay.
Kate Cook and the council voted on for the CIP.
I just wanted to check in with the people on Zoom. Can you hear and follow this at this point?
Yes, everything's good.
Same here.
Great. It's great because Kate is putting the spreadsheet on the screen, but that means we don't get to see who's here. And welcome to Kristen.
Can I ask a question about
Absolutely.
sustainability committee roles / purpose? I know that we have the advising the council and advising like the development of the master plan and all of that. There are also lots of new developments going up in Portsmouth, not city developments, general new developments. And is there any position for this role in providing resources for other actors in the Portsmouth space? Like, hey, you're not a city company, but you're coming in, you're gonna develop these, and just so you know, we've got this long-term plan that we're trying to align the city towards. What
So
is our-
you're talking about private development
Yeah.
in the city of Portsmouth. So one thing that this committee did under Tori's leadership, working with the city, developed a green buildings
Mhm.
plan. So that's one way we're working with private developers, but I'm not sure.
Doesn't it only apply to a city building?
Correct.
Right. Yeah, okay.
So
So
maybe-
now you're
maybe-
talking about, yeah, private development. You know, one thing to do would be to read through the plan and see wherever it talks about things that pertain to private development. Bill?
Yeah, no, I think that's a good point, Colleen. I think in the CAP, there is a recommendation, I think, related to density of development.
Mhm.
And when we said roles connecting the CAP to the master plan and other high priority city plans or initiatives, I mean, I think that's the way we put it other times, that includes all the work that's going on and has happened in the last year on affordable housing and housing in general. And I think some of us have always tried to get the CAP linked up to
Yeah.
that in terms of transportation plus housing and reducing greenhouse gas emissions because of people living, let's say, closer into.
And
The center.
Josh, do you have a point?
Yeah, I'll just add to that, some of the boards by New Hampshire statute have an active role to play in
Mhm.
developments, like planning board. Or if people want to appeal those decisions, zoning board, or sorry, historic district commission. Then there are other types of boards like the conservation commission, which they may be required to go in front of, but it's just recommendations that are
Yeah.
highly encouraged. there's no statute out there saying that they have to take our input, so there's really no. One of the only ways for us to get stuff in front of them, I guess, two ways. One could be attend meetings or speak to people, let's say, on other committees, which they have to go in front of, like the technical advisory committee, and just say like, hey, this is our thoughts. If there isn't even a public comment there or public comment at those meetings,
Mhm.
just bringing up those points, but it's tough because we don't have the same statutory role as some of the other boards do.
I think it's a great idea. I think going to the planning board meeting when a developer's in front of the planning board as a member of the sustainability committee and saying, the city has a green building policy. What about you following a green build? What's your green building? I mean, we do ask them in their development, but it's hard for the boards to make them do these things. But if citizens go and push for it, then maybe they'll move the needle a little bit. It'd take a lot of work. It would take going to a lot of meetings, and the earlier you get there, so like attack would be better because they haven't fully, got their plan developed, but that's how you get the community to do things, is by pushing it a little bit that way. But if that's the community pushing it, there's no teeth, like you said. But you could ask them, you're gonna be a developer that's working in the city. What are you doing to make your developments more sustainable? I think that's a totally reasonable question to ask people, and a lot of times they'll have a really good answer. Some developments are doing tons of great stuff, and some are doing as much as they feel like they can, or they don't understand it, and they might be educated. So I don't know how you start to organize to do it, but you could go to any one of the boards that have a public comment session, or you could reach out to developers that or have a project coming up outside of a board meeting and say, just reaching out to promote, any interest you might have in sustainability.
Yeah, and that's one of the purposes of having a green building policy for the city.
You're
was
trying to be a
say,
leader. Yeah.
Doing this. Bill?
And beyond just the physical structure of the building, I think in our role as advising on the CAP and on sustainability, it seems like it could be useful to let the developers know there is a climate plan, and to let them know, let's say at the Christmas tree lot where they're saying that we're going to be developing transit access and walk and bike facilities, just to encourage that, because it might be considered a really positive thing by the developers to build community support for their project when they're going before the regulatory boards, just to bring in the sustainability perspective, and specifically that there is a cap and you can be supportive of it, not only in your materials, but also in how you do your siting. Same thing for developers of the affordable housing, Sherburne School, Service Credit Union, just to put those issues on the table, because maybe someone else will if we don't, but if we do, then you can be more assured that there's visibility where it's needed.
So we're telling them sustainability is important to us. If you can curry favor with us by, taking the initiative to put some of these things into your project. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, and you could be building political support on the supportive council, which endorsed the CAP, and also in all the community members that have shown up for the affordable housing meetings and other things. It's connecting, really our role, connecting the dots in the name of sustainability.
And staying on message.
Oh, sorry.
Focusing the message, providing the message, and then helping stay on the message. Yeah.
Jess, did you have?
Well, I think this is a great conversation. But another role that we might play is educate some of the other boards. So going to talk to the planning board and specifically like what is in the CAP that might be relevant to them when they're looking at new development, and how they want to think about it and questions they want to ask. I know on Conservation Commission, we try, but our purview is a little different. So that's a question for you. Like, I don't know always how much I can push that, but like, it might be helpful, like if we had a conversation with the Conservation Commission and where the CAP was involved, and they could kind of figure out what pieces of it were applicable to when they're looking at an application. And
But the same way that the Conservation Commission has their sort of criteria for approval, the
Mhm.
Board of Adjustment has their hardship criteria that people go through, the planning board has the zoning ordinance it uses and site review regs. That's what they're kind of guided by. And to the extent they can bring sustainability, and it's limited by what they're allowed to do in those requirements. If someone from the public says, come do more than what you're required to do, and so it's kind of like the skip the stuff. We're saying, do more than what you do today.
Yeah.
You don't have to, but here's what you can do. And so it's education, but I think it's educating like Colleen said, the developer
I agree.
or the applicant that
But I
there's
also
more they
feel
can
like
do.
from Conservation Commission, like developers know our concerns about the wetlands, and
Yeah.
so they've gotten a lot better coming with their applications, addressing
Yeah.
those things before they even walk in the door. So like
Right.
maybe if there were questions that boards and committees could be asking just to get developers thinking along those lines,
there
even
is
if they're
some-
not required to. I know Kate made the checklist and
Right.
she's
The-
trying
Yeah,
to,
the
but
green, what is it, the green building checklist? What are your, in
Oh, for
TAC, they have to go through and talk about sustainability initiatives in the project. But there's no teeth to it. It's just like, and then they kind of, some take it to heart and go really deep and some don't, but I guess I feel like the suggestion is
Yeah.
more adding that community component to bring the community to a meeting to educate the developer or outside of a meeting
Mhm.
is something that doesn't really happen that much. You don't see
Mhm.
that happen.
Let's-
Sometimes.
Let's tie up this conversation and then get back to the list. Colleen, do you want to?
Yeah, and I guess so, I think that there's I think the goal is that as developments come in, we want them, because they're developing for, the long term, we want them to be in the long term aligned with the cap, so that and they should be aware, I mean, like a development went in near where my Nana lives, and they had no idea that there was a bus stop, like the real estate agents trying to sell it didn't know there was a bus stop right next to it, or a bike trail, or like a public park. I was like, these are good things for trying to sell an apartment. Like, you should tell people this. And so I think that, kind of like Peter was saying, like as early on in the process, developing those relationships as possible. And to the point about the committee chart, like priorities, I think there's some sort of like cross-functional or cross-priority stakeholder engagement focus that I think that would be a full load of responsibility, as opposed to taking on sort of like what you were saying, like, let's not get
Right, and
siloed.
I think we have something like that on the list. Josh, you want to just?
Yeah, I just want to add one more thing, which it'll be a throwback for Bert and Peter. It might be worth mentioning if we do start doing this is, remember CPACE? Like 8 years ago when I was trying to push it, it was essentially a privately funded fund for private
Okay,
businesses to do renewal or more green energy projects on their buildings.
we have it
Property assessed clean energy. No, we don't have it.
in Portsmouth. I saw it on the website. I don't know, maybe I missed
Yeah,
it.
there were, well,
Not this one.
we.
Oh, okay, not CPACE.
The,
Okay, thank
I
you.
don't remember if I pushed for it being enacted in the ordinances years ago, but the underlying statute wasn't good in the sense that no one who enacted it had any success. There's now a new statute, which apparently is more favorable for these projects off the ground. And if it does, then it'd be worth it. And if the city were to pick it up and enact it, that'd be one more thing that we could talk about at PAC or wherever else, saying, hey, there are funds out there available for private businesses to do these kind of things.
Yeah. And I think PACE, if that's what you call it, is in the climate action plan.
Yeah.
But I
property-
don't think
It's called
CPACE.
property assessed clean energy, and CPACE is commercial property assessed.
Oh,
clean energy.
okay,
So it's
And
thank
commercial
you.
properties.
Okay.
Basically, if it's commercial property assessed clean energy, then it's a business that can they say they put solar panels on their roof. They pay for them with a lien on their property. And when they sell their property, that lien stays with the property. So they're not having to amortize the cost of like a lot of businesses wouldn't do that unless they knew they could do it over the long term. But if they don't know if they're going to stick around, but they sell their building, then some other business comes in and they take it over. So it supposedly encourages more renewables because of that, I think.
So let's get back to the chart, and page 1 is all related to transportation and transit. So Bill, I don't know if we want to look at these, and Fred, as kind of a big unit. I think the Fred had expressed some interest in creating EV charging plan. And I thought that
Yeah.
that was in the last capital
It
improvement.
was, I don't know the
So-
status of it, so.
Yeah.
Fred, what we had done maybe 3 years ago, requested that the CIP the following year includes like $150,000. 150 or 1 point, I remember how many millions it added up to, It may have been 1.5 million a year for the next 5 years to go towards a electrification plan, and then there's a year gap. I haven't seen anything done with that, and CIP funding, just because it's allocated, doesn't mean that's gonna be spent. So that's something else I could follow up on
Oh, that'd
at
be
a meeting,
great.
ask for if any progress has been done towards that. Just to report back.
And
on.
that would be very helpful if it hasn't moved,
Yeah.
and it's putting in a new request for
Mhm.
capital
Yeah, 'cause
improvement.
it's still in the plan, 150. I'm not good with zeros. I think it was 1.5 million a year allocated towards it. But either way, yeah, I could follow up to see what the status of that is, because it's still in the plan, but doesn't mean that anything's happened with it.
But city funded,
It would be, well, there's. I don't know how it was broken down, if it was city funds or state funds or grants from the federal government, but it was in the plan to be funded.
okay,
So funding for the plan or funding for the
actual
installations?
Installation of
Okay.
the wiring and chargers and everything else.
what about, like encouraging private investment in, charging infrastructure? Like
That was not
Tesla,
part
for
of
example.
this.
You're understood, but I mean, would that be a complement to that? Maybe a good city funded stuff, government funded stuff, and then private development, like, charge point and things like that.
I know there's more Volkswagen funds out there that were just announced for private businesses.
And then zoning comes up with that.
Right, right.
Has the city competed for the Volkswagen funds? Peter?
Or no?
I think they're allocated to the state.
Yeah, to the state, but then I think the state may allocate.
Yeah,
to
the state had
communities.
applications out a while ago.
It was 100,000 a year from federal and state funds and 50,000 a year from parking revenue. That's what the idea said.
On that table, I think it would be useful to group the first one with the last two, because I look at those really as a potentially a package for
The
mode shift.
electrification of the school. bus
No,
fleet?
no, I mean the second, the non-motorized, the first one.
The ones that say Bill Lyons.
Yeah, the one that says bike and pedestrian plan with the
Oh,
public
okay.
transit, yeah. Because those, I think, are a bit different from the EV charging. You know, those are the two primary pillars, transportation pillars, is the EV and the mode shift. Would go together. I really like the criteria across the top. And I don't think it really necessarily duplicates the criteria that are in the cap. I mean, it's related, but I think it's an adaptation that applies to maybe what we do
Right.
as a committee, and a useful thing maybe for the next meeting, maybe not for all of those and not for every box, but just to start thinking about who the partners are and what the activities are. So for example, on that first one, looking backwards, one of the things the committee could do is what we've already done, which is to make sure the cap is referenced in the non-motorized, in the new updated bike pedestrian plan by participating in the advisory committee and pushing it. I think it's there. The cap is referenced there, probably wouldn't have been referenced otherwise. So that's an example
Right.
backward looking that we should be trying to duplicate on all the activities.
And Bill, I don't know that it would be important to hear from you or Fred or Charles monthly about what's going on with that, but it would be good if we all were kind of tracking where that was, especially this microtransit shuttle loop, big interest of interest to commercial realtors.
Yeah. And it's, some of these things are easier to stay on top of and others aren't, like the micro transit
Yeah,
is, and shuttle is in the CIP. And the EDC has worked on it, but the ability to sort of get in sync with the EDC on this, I don't know how to do that, and I've tried a couple times. I think when the council voted on that item to add to the CIP, when Josh and Kate Cook were adding CIP activities, I think Andrew Bagley said, on the micro transit, there's multiple interests on this, and we need to make sure it's all aligned. So that's an example of where there is work to be done.
Yeah. Great. So I think because of your familiarity with the topic and city issues generally, that you, at this point, are set working on this.
On those
Three.
three, yeah. With Tyler and anyone else who would like to join.
Unfortunately, Chaz isn't here, but he was interested
I think Anka,
as well.
Anka too.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So the EV charging plan, Fred, I made a note there in parentheses, public city fleet e-bikes, and then to think about equity and multifamily housing units,
Sure.
because that, I think that was in the plan somewhere, I'm not sure. Yeah,
Right, yeah.
it was just like a note not to forget that.
Uh-huh.
So I guess your next step on that one, if you want to take this on, is research.
Yeah.
And then think, okay, right.
Okay.
And then Josh Denton, electrification of city fleet. You had mentioned some interest in that last time.
Correct.
And then I added, because I looked up something about it, idle reduction.
I saw you added that.
And I thought, see if he takes it.
The, do we still have no idling signs in front of the schools?
In front of Little Harbor, yes.
Yeah, you do.
But I don't think
We do.
anybody pays attention to them, but they are there, yes. Probably not enough.
My car's not new enough. I know a lot of vehicles engines shut off at stop signs. Is that the case with cars when they just
Yeah.
are parked?
Yeah.
Okay.
Huh.
So it might be, the no idling might be more case for older cars than
Yeah.
cars that are coming out now. Maybe just more signage.
So the city fleet, I don't know the aging of the city fleet, but I imagine there's a fair number of older cars in the city fleet.
Oh, so you want the no idling to apply to the city? fleet.
Well, I just,
I
yeah,
was thinking no idling.
yeah,
In general.
well,
I think it's still a policy that they're not supposed to sit and idle with city vehicles.
Including police?
Yeah.
I think.
That's not, yeah,
DPW, yeah. I mean, that was a whole
Take
city
that off.
policy
yeah.
years ago, like a
yeah.
long time ago.
That may be something that starts with education as opposed to regulation and
Well, and to see if there is a policy, as Peter mentioned.
No idea.
So electrification of the city fleet, I mean, if we put idling aside for now.
Yeah, I'm still interested in pursuing that. And I didn't get far at all last year, with CIP, and I hope but they already have some idea that the ask is coming forward again.
Yeah,
It's to essentially the same ask, and I could do more.
so there was an ask in the last CIP?
There, I didn't ask to get it into the CIP and it was outvoted.
Okay,
And that was essentially money to do a RFP to figure out, to make a plan. So just money to
Yeah.
make a plan instead of just saying, hey, here's a plan for you to implement.
yeah,
If I
Yeah.
looked at other cities who
That's
did
great.
similar RFPs and talked about.
oh, good.
Again, did not pass.
as a resource on the school buses, the fourth meeting last week of the New Hampshire CAPS transportation group that Tyler was also on, there was a very nice presentation from a school bus company that specializes in EVs about what they've done around for school buses around the state and the challenges of it and the progress and the changes in technology. So that's certainly a good resource because other places around the state are doing it.
Yeah,
And New Hampshire DES is looking at that as something to include in the state plan. So there may be some potential for that plan to be supportive of our
yeah.
plan or vice versa.
And we missed out on a lot of grant funding for school buses. I'm not saying that we've missed entirely, but some of that I think has disappeared.
Clawed back is the word.
What's that? Well, oh,
Back.
back, yes.
Well, and I think Nancy it'll be helpful to hear from Nancy, because I think one of the issues with school buses is that we outsource the school buses.
Right.
So it's another level of remove from the
We
city.
talked about that because I had talked to the superintendent's office last year and they sent the current contract. But the current contract was an extension of the original contract and I didn't get that. So she was going to follow up on that and talk.
Maybe they could include that in the contract is what you're thinking. Oh,
I had the
Yes,
feeling
some
that,
places would do a phase in the contract.
I had the feeling that the presenter last week for the New Hampshire CAP is a contractor providing school buses. And didn't you ask a question about how much the drivers like driving
Yeah,
the EV buses and got a very, I think, mostly positive?
yeah, that was a nice surprise.
So contractors in this,
Yeah.
I don't know for sure, but this is probably one of the major school bus contractors for the state.
You could see how many there were in the state, right? These school buses. I didn't know. of
Catch
any.
that. One of the problems is they're not recording these, but she had very good slides, so we probably could grab the slides, pass those around.
So I haven't talked to Student Transportation of America at this point, but I'll talk to Nancy further and see. She didn't commit to putting her name on the list, but she is following up. The next one, we're already on page 2. Yeah, Fred and Effie, adoption of new zoning to allow private solar arrays. I honestly haven't checked in with the planning board where they are on that. With Soul Smart, is there any feedback on the adoption of zoning to allow private solar arrays?
it is on the planning board's list of amendments to make, zoning amendments, and they're trying to move forward on those. They keep getting new ones put in front of them, like the co-living and
Yeah.
so, but it's on the list.
I had presented a couple of pages of comments about what was in and never heard back from them, so I can check in with Rick Chelman or. And then we can follow up.
Good.
And then I put something for the city. Kate, I don't know if you want to put your name on the list. Build solar arrays with capacity to power municipal buildings.
Sounds nice.
And Peter Ritz, the Director of Public Works, gave a report back to the city council. Sorry, Peter Wright. You're right. So, Peter Rice gave a report back on both the possibility of doing solar out at Coakley and or doing
Not
wind power.
Jones Ave.
Thank you. I'm all over the place. Let me stop speaking after this.
Landfill? Jones Ave?
On Jones
Yeah,
Ave.
Jones Ave landfill. And then the other thing was potentially doing wind power, small possible turbine, whether it be out at Pierce Island, at the wastewater treatment plant, which would cause some issues at the Madbury water
Yeah, 3.
location. And then, remember the third one?
That's the 3. Pierce Island, just Pease
Pease.
and Madbury.
And I believe the report is expected to the Renewable Energy Committee itself at the next meeting. That's,
Reports coming back that, so they
Enrel?
contracted with NREL. They got basically a grant to have NREL do some technical assistance and review it. I don't know that it'll be as ready, but it might be ready for the
yeah,
next
I'll,
Energy Advisory Committee meeting. Yeah, it might be. It's soon. They're pretty far along, but they haven't provided a report yet, but they provided a little presentation on where they're at. And so, the concern, I think, or not the concern, but the issue is that the payback period is like 12 to 15 years or something. And I don't think it includes all the potential variables as well, so. But we'll have a written report that'll go through all that.
Oh, that's great.
so yeah, May 7th was the date, which was potentially
Oh, great.
mentioned. And for Jones Ave, it could be up to 1.7 megawatts. which
Of solar
substantial.
power. Yeah.
Peter, does solar have the same payback period as wind?
I think solar's faster.
Yeah, I would think so.
Yeah, and I think the one thing about solar, at least what we do at Madbury and this high school is, it's easier to implement in some ways because you do a power purchase agreement. So it's basically, it turns into your utility bill because someone else is providing it and maintaining it. And you don't need to get like council approval to buy a bunch of solar panels. You just switch your utility provider to this power purchase agreement for the treatment plant. And that adds to your utility bill. And then after a certain amount of time, which we're getting close to, I imagine at Madbury, that you can buy that equipment. And then you're getting it for free for the life of the equipment. So that's the long-term savings too. So I think it's a better deal, but you have to have space to do it.
Well, that's great. There's all this going
Yeah,
on.
not to jump
So-
on your. feet.
So we're not gonna put your name on the list, Kate.
away.
Yeah, that's okay. The next one, further community-wide building weatherization. We didn't have anyone speak up for this at the last meeting. Tori would probably be interested in this. But it's just a very important activity in the climate action plan, and it's related to all the work going on with housing. When I was in my Portsmouth Listens housing group, I kept bringing up weatherization, and some people didn't get the connection. But if you have a house that's uninsulated and the windows are falling out, you're paying for energy costs. So it's part of the housing issue. But we'll just leave this on the list for now unless anyone is particularly interested, following up and finding out more about it. Josh, you're up on enterprise funds for storm. Maybe you don't have a report
Yeah.
back yet.
I don't have a report back yet, but I made the request and it was unanimous vote by the city council for the city manager to give a report back on the status of the stormwater enterprise fund. That was at the first meeting this month. So maybe at next month's meeting,
Okay,
we'll have, maybe,
maybe.
and that's just on what the status of it is. Whether or not there's some legal hurdles, which some communities are currently facing and trying to implement. But there'll be an update.
Great. Maxon brought up that he specializes in reduction of water loss, but I really don't know enough about it to speak to it. And it was in the part of the plan that's about resilience, and it wasn't addressed directly. So I think we'll need to have him here to explore that a bit more. I know that the library, as one of the things they lend out, has a thing where you can see if you have a water leak. What's it called? Does anyone know? No, my poor description. I'll tell you next month. And Jess has spoken a bit about the creation of a zero waste plan. Again, we're not expecting this committee to write one. But as she suggested, checking what other cities are doing, what it would cost to have a consultant team do that kind of thing. Next.
That only applied to city operations?
I
No.
think the long-term vision would be that it's everywhere, but in the way that it's written in the cap is the focus is the community.
Sure.
That make, let me make sure I'm looking at the right ones.
WM1.
Yeah, that's just, yeah, so. Which would see Portsmouth community reduce, reuse, recycle, and compost at least 90% of its solid waste. So it's intended for community wide.
And the next one, household and restaurant activities to reduce plastic waste and waste generally. You mentioned that with Skip the Stuff and in community engagement. Do you want to say anything else?
No, I think, like I said, I follow up with Kristen. I owe her an email, have another conversation with you and kind of see what our role can be as the committee to help support what's already happening or what might be next potential steps. So,
We should be looking for opportunities to add Echo Club members, including particularly those involved in this committee, because I know this one is one they've been active on.
So going to page 3. I am listed, this is just up my alley. Addition of energy criteria to capital and operating budget criteria. And Peter and and Bill, we've talked about this for some years, so I have some material. I'm happy to do the research on that, but if anyone wants to be involved, just give me a call or email. Be happy to work with you on that.
Someone's got a hand raised.
Oh. Kristen?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, I was late. I'm just wondering, since I was late, did I miss any discussion about possibly doing something with skip stuff at farmers market?
Not yet.
Not yet.
Oh,
We will
okay.
follow up with you on that
Okay.
one.
Okay,
Yeah.
sounds good. Thanks.
Yeah. Yep.
So the second one on this page is advocacy from this group for updating the greenhouse gas inventory regularly. And the one that's in the climate action plan is from 2021. I just checked to make sure my understanding was right, and it's 2021, so I think we have to say we need another plan. And they do the climate action plan by year, so the
Talk about the greenhouse gas inventory?
I'm sorry,
Yeah.
Okay,
I'm sorry, greenhouse gas inventory.
okay, sorry.
So do we have to wait for next year to do a greenhouse gas inventory, or could we do one mid-year for the year?
I don't think you'd want to do it mid-year, but you don't have to wait. You can do it any year you choose to do.
That's what I'm asking, yeah.
It's usually it's at least past the year you're gonna do. Quite a little bit, so you have all the data together.
Oh,
Hard to
okay.
get the data otherwise. You have to be kind of few months past the end of the
And
year.
last year you did it working with a committee member who used the UNH, I don't remember the name of the
Yeah.
method,
Didn't
but
work out so.
yeah.
Yeah, I think we
So-
decided that in the future, we're either gonna go back to ICLEI and try to,
Could you tell
get-
the committee what ICLEI is? Sorry.
I have no idea what it stands for.
National Climate.
Council on Local Environmental Initiatives, but they
Yeah.
don't use that anymore, they say.
They just say ICLEI because it's so
It's a-
catchy.
It's a government, municipal membership program, kind of like, well, it's a municipal, you can be a member and it's like a sustainability initiatives sort of program. And
And
they have a
they-
software called ClearPath?
ClearPath, I
Yeah,
think.
that does a good job of collecting all the information.
Is
So we
Portsmouth
would have
ever-
to contract with
Not
them.
anymore. No.
I think in the past, the 2006, 2012, and 2018 were all done by interns that used the ICLEI software. And then when John and I did the UNH software, it was just way too different. And frankly, we were not experts, so we really had no business doing it. So there was a lot of disclaimers on that 2021 update. So I think our idea is either get funding to hire someone who knows the ICLEI software to do it every couple of years or 5 years, or go back to the intern.
So
Who
we
is
just
working
need
on
a
it.
capital budget request.
Yeah, I would, for either for an intern or for a consultant,
Yeah.
Okay.
because there's not enough,
Just,
not the staff capacity, and you kind of need someone to focus on it full time.
okay.
To really do a good job.
And I think when Effie and I were kind of looking through this list again, based on when it was, what the year is for the last time, because I know the committee had talked about, do we do it every year? Do we do it every 3 or 5? Well, based on 2021, we're, pretty much already at 5 years. So it seems like something that we need to think about doing sooner than later. And then maybe we shift our timeline moving forward if, or does it stay every 5 or should it be every 3 or?
For every 10. I mean, I
Yeah.
would just play devil's advocate and say, it'd be nice to hear why we want to do it and compare it, because one of the issues with it is that there's a lot of generalizations and you don't get the resolution that you think you're gonna get. So it's not a it's not as much of a benchmarking tool as it is of a, here's where we are today. That's really useful, but comparing it to past years, it's almost always different how it's done, or the data you're collecting is different because it's improved how you collect it. So there's some challenges with using it. There's a lot of cities that have moved away from it, like Portland, Maine, because they feel like they want to just keep reaching to do things. And it's a metric. It's something that you can use to measure is the idea. But when you go down and look at the data, it's not as, the resolution isn't as good on a lot of the areas. So it might be something that you want to investigate a little bit more, see what other communities are doing before we dive in with both feet to say we want to keep doing it, because
Bill?
Yeah, picking up on the point about thinking about why do it. I mean, it's really to set a baseline that changes over time. So it's really what are the sources at any particular time, and it seems most valuable if you're doing an update to the plan. And I would put a greater value on the monitoring of results of the CAP, which is somewhat related to it, but you want to look across the different sectors and the recommendations to see where you've succeeded in actually reducing greenhouse gases emissions to meet the targets that are in the plan and to use the metrics that are in the plan. And I'm sure there's some monitoring language in the CAP, but I don't know really where that stands. And it seems like that's an important role for this committee to be advising on. I mean, we're not going to go out and do the modeling, let's say after 1 year, 3 years, 5 years to see how successful the city and the community has been. But that to me seems like a higher priority than updating the inventory, which is more of a intense technical exercise for where you are at this point in time, as opposed to using data for monitoring.
I'm sure we'll talk more about this. Fred?
Was 2021 the first time we've done a greenhouse gas inventory?
Oh,
2006, 2012, 2018, and 2021.
and the first three were all hard to compare for the very reason that there were different techniques. I think 1 year, some private entities weren't making their information available to people requesting it. So
Yeah.
it was all over the place.
And the regional grid, well, Reggie, but not Reggie, but the grid,
ISO.
ISO New England that provides the electricity, they changed the percentage of greenhouse gas emissions in that, and probably because of Reggie. But so it's really hard, I think, to Bill's point, you might be better off looking at specific items and going back and comparing them to get, here's a baseline since the CAP or at the CAP time, and then here's how we've progressed, and then you can do, because there's some areas where there's pretty decent resolution, and some areas or it's accurate, and some areas are big generalizations, like you're using census data to talk about how much heating oil is used. Otherwise, how are you going to figure out how much heating oil is used? But the census data is updated every 5 or 10 years. And so you're not, if you do your inventory every 5 years, you may not get the new data. I don't know. So there's some issues with it for sure.
At very least, to be thinking about, are we going in the wrong direction or the right direction? And can we quantify that? Which will really depend on the sectors. It'll be easier for some things and not for others. Like if it's weatherization and solar additions, that'll be easier. Or if it's a reduction in single occupant vehicle miles and trips, that'll be easier.
I think at the end of the day, you're trying to tell a story. And if you're telling a story based on here's what our CAP said we're going to do, and here's what we did based on what our CAP said we were going to do, that's an easier story to tell than our CAP said we're going to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. Our inventory says all these things, and we think we've improved here, but we're not sure because the data, it's a more data-driven exercise rather than a qualitative exercise on here's the CAP and here's how we've improved.
And it can target activity, research, and resources.
So let's move on to Bert. You're next on our list. It was hard for me to capture what you said in the last meeting. I apologize for that. I know you wanted us to look at focusing on results and systems. So it might have to do with something Bill said earlier, that a lot of these activities are cross-cutting
Or complementary.
or complementary. But I don't know if I captured it, but I think you would have some ideas about how we're doing this. So I just wanted to check in with you.
I looked at that and I said, I don't have anything really profound here, but what came up was a committee that has a budget, that money, then you need to have criteria to how to spread it out. And that's pretty clear. And so I was thinking, this committee, what do we have? We have our collective knowledge, and we have a legal status to advise. And the legal status is to advise the city council. And I think we have a mandate to do public engagement. Now, am I still, everybody
Yep.
there? Is that accurate? That's high level. And so when I hear Bill talking about connecting the dots, I love the fact that I see each person here has their own area of expertise. And we haven't deliberately selected our committee to go to all the sectors. So we might be very lopsided, just like the status of ICLEI report through the years. I've never really seen us use it very much in any way that got leverage. I think it informed Peter when he was doing it, and we informed 3 interns who worked for the summer, so we were educating and a lot was going on. So maybe some of the intangible results. So what I'm thinking here, and I don't have any conclusion, but one of the ways we engaged the city and the public was Peter and I had a little dog and pony shows, that what you call it, with slideshows on the big picture, the natural step. And that really at the time got us some leverage. And it's got us into the master plan. And that was kind of leverage. So I think that was a useful educational piece. I think we're beyond that in terms of where we are in terms of sustainability. And as I've introduced before, the idea that we're in a stage where we have urgency and real need to scale. And so one of the things that the CAP does is give us specifics how we can get more urgent. That's what I think you're talking about, and how to scale. The only concrete thing that I thought was the Portsmouth Climate Action Group is having community conversations, and one might be about the CAP. And as we do that, since our leverage point of connecting the dots would be somehow to integrate what we're doing here in that community conversation. And I'm doing that because what I can contribute, which is I think about every day, all day, is how to organize groups of people to get together, to interact and absorb information. So those were some of the ideas. Bill has, how were you titling the community conversation, Bill? We talked about this.
A community of practice.
What's that?
Community of practice.
Community of practice, but when we were talking about a conversation, do we have a title for that?
About the CAP.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we we're thinking about that as a next meeting,
Yeah,
community conversation, and I think it didn't seem to be the impetus for that. I think, Peter, when I talked to you, it seemed like maybe a focus on bright action would be good, and that maybe a focus on CAP implementation might be later in the year. I think Effie, you had some opinions on that, you know, I think that the Portsmouth Climate Action was thinking of well, this is a couple months ago, May community conversation, but I think I sort of put that to the side.
because I think I was at a talk last night from Sustainable Harvest, the World Council, and there were 70 people in the room, and they had people online. So there's a big crowd there I mean, people, but they're all people who have come over time. And I think that if we had a community conversation on the CAP, I don't know how many people would get, but I think we'd get the choir, and the choir would talk amongst itself, and it'd give each of us an opportunity. So that's basically where I'm at this point.
Well, you know, that's good in a way because Colleen, you're next on the list. And I know you talked about awareness efforts and opportunities for both households and businesses. But, you know, again, I tried to capture some of the
Yeah.
ideas here.
And I think I got distracted when I originally looked at this because I saw the words bright action and I was like, that's in process. I think that what the committee is already proficient in is mass stakeholder engagement with Bright Action, the Portsmouth Climate Action Plan, community conversations, the sustainability fair. And that's really effective with people who are engaged and aware. And I feel like we've captured that audience already. And I do think sort of, you know, paralleling the importance of a zero waste guidebook, we'll say, for the households that was also on this chart. Having that guidance is really important for businesses and households for the adaptation and mitigation side. But if we are having these long-term, or if we're selecting priorities, I think what comes to my mind is wanting targeted stakeholder engagement so that we are, as we're moving forward with transit, that, you know, whoever's working on it has, you know, that partnership list that you put on the slide deck of these are all the committees, and we can reach out to Sabre and we can reach out to UNH, that is an active and facilitated and resourced part of the process. So I think that's the, you know, we're good at the mass stakeholder engagement. I think that my focus is more on getting to the targeted stakeholder engagement, which crucially doesn't really fit in a specific CAP priority because it's more about practice than about subject matter. If that makes sense.
So that seems to tie with Bright Action if it's about practice.
But Bright Action is voluntary, and it's the people who go looking for, I guess what I'm thinking more is the showing up to committee meetings, the reaching out directly to developers or to businesses and saying like it's about us forming the relationship, being the proactive member of the relationship, as opposed to being present so that people will come to us.
Right.
The ones who are coming to us
Okay,
are already
okay.
here in
Mhm.
this room.
Or they're coming to the community
Or
conversation.
they're coming to the community
That's-
conversations, or,
And
yeah.
then I
or
think
the sustainability fair.
when Bert says the usual suspects, I think that's something we've struggled with on the community
Yes.
conversations, because we put a lot of effort into publicizing outreach, and often it's, if there's 30 people there, it's the same 20 people or 25
Yeah.
people that should, so it's just a struggle to get a greater community understanding, let's say, on the.
No, I agree, and I empathize with that. I think that the opportunity for people to show up to those events and the fact that these events happen is really important for like civic process in terms of making a particular thing happen, the group of immediately relevant, the first tier of stakeholders is generally smaller. And I think we need to facilitate people coming into the urgency and the action more.
It sounds like you have some pretty specific ideas. If you went through the climate action plan, could you list out the kinds of people we could reach out to rather than expecting them to come to us?
Well, I think you did. The partners for the sustainability committee slide,
partners
I
list.
think is like it's a pretty comprehensive starting list.
It's a
Of like,
big
hey,
list.
here's a bunch of committees and here's a bunch of nonprofits. I think that what I guess I'm emphasizing, and is sort of the words are coming to me as I'm saying them, so I don't know how coherent it always is, but the emphasis on practice as opposed to subject matter, where this chart is like, here are our priorities. I'm saying on a cross priority basis, how are we approaching stakeholders and the knowledge that we're collecting, and like that sort of interdisciplinary systemic side of sustainability, which Bill had also been alluding to and you had been talking about.
Well, I have an idea about that. So we are in the master plan process, and this committee is certainly charged to do sustainability in the work of the committee. One thing we're trying to do in the master plan is reach as many different groups as we can, more broadly than we have in past master plans. Maybe there's a role for the committee to do, its own sort of outreach, maybe along the lines of the community conversation, talking about having, maybe the master plan is the vehicle to get people to a meeting, and then we talk about the cap or something like that. I mean, or, maybe there's more to it than that, but I feel like through the master plan, we might be able to there's a lot of people interested in the master plan.
Mhm.
So maybe that's a way to bring people in, and then this group would want to talk about sustainability, obviously, in the master plan.
How about a community conversation on the master plan and sustainability /
Yeah.
cap?
That's what I was thinking.
Is the master plan something that gets updated annually, or how does that work?
About every 10 years.
Oh, okay.
That's
No.
quite an important opportunity in
Yeah.
Stone, and
Yeah.
sustainability isn't there. It's a lost opportunity
Yeah.
for sure.
It's an opportunity.
It's
Yeah.
an opportunity, right?
Yeah.
Exactly. And it's a place where we need to talk about sustainability and the cap,
Yeah.
certainly, and
Yeah.
talk about it as much as get feedback from the community. Does the community support the cap? How many people in the community really care about the cap is what is the kind of outreach we're looking for, is it?
Or even know what's in it.
Or even know what's in it? Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, when we first started the community conversations about 2 years ago, they were really consistently set up to provide input to the cap.
Yep.
Like a transportation or a waste or energy efficiency. Those were really set up for that. And I don't think the consultant came to those meetings, but I think we provided notes.
That
and
input was
comments.
taken, yeah, for
That
sure.
was part
Yeah,
of the
yeah.
cited
One of the outreach.
community input.
And I think that's the thing with the master plan. I don't think the consultant can be everywhere. So we need other groups to do work to support the master plan. And it's education about the cap, it's education about the master plan, but it's also feedback on what the community wants. That's the goal of the master plan, is where does the city want to go
Mhm.
over the next 10 years or 20 years?
So Peter, I just want to review, I think I like your idea. And I just want to get clarity and maybe build on it. I think the biggest turnout we had was when we had several hundred people at for the where to locate the middle school, and people turned out. Portsmouth Listen had some dialogues for 17 folks. Okay. Portsmouth Listens has kind of gone into either a hold and stay position or where it moves out. So in terms of a consultant, what at this point outreach activities does a consultant have, or is that already, is that what he's putting as a plan?
They're just, they're. The consultant we've hired has done, different master plans. They have different techniques. But part of the outreach is to hire a local organizer to help on the ground sort of with the outreach. But there'll be community meetings, there'll be advisory committees. But I think things like the community conversation would feed in nicely to getting, more of that broad outreach, different audiences. I mean, what we'd love to see is a whole bunch of different audiences instead of the same voices that we hear a lot.
Yeah, I mean, you go out to the senior, I
Yep.
mean, the senior.
Have it at different places, go to different people,
places,
different
go to
times a
community
day.
Campus, yeah,
And then go to places too, go to where there's a group meeting or having an activity and having a small, master plan interaction, whatever that might be, survey or talking or just a table somewhere like a.
I think this is a great opportunity Peter identified, and I'm just going to give Jess a chance to talk, and then I'd like to close this discussion on the Portsmouth cap. Jess?
Well, I was just gonna say, I feel like everything I'm hearing people say right now sort of piggybacks to what Colleen was originally thinking of, like, find alternate spaces. Like, we know the same people show up at the community conversations all the time, so that would be valuable, but where are some other places that we might make a presence or piggyback on something that's already going on at one of the elementary schools, and then we could just have a conversation or get some feedback. So I think I'm not sure if that's exactly what you're thinking, but that's what I heard. So if you have
Yeah.
ideas about that, I think that would be great, because Bill already said it. I agree. That's sort of always been our struggle with some of this community outreach stuff. It's often the same group of people,
Yeah.
generally speaking, who show up. So if you can find effective ways to, interact with some other groups that.
And I'm gonna let Colleen respond further next month.
Yes, I have to I have
know you
to
have-
absorb a lot, and we've talked about
Coming at you, and it's great, because you've opened the door and then Peter's added an opportunity.
Sorry, Abby, I'll be really quick, but I'm really scatterbrained and I didn't think of this until today, so I apologize. But just to save people time, part of our contract with the consultant for the climate action plan, they did give us a pretty broad range of criteria and things that went under that criteria, so we don't have to reiterate that. And it was an internal document just because it was really messy, and we kind of, in the actual plan, they only chose like 4 or 5 of these columns to put under each strategy because it just couldn't all fit. But the consultants went around and kind of designated and did research on how much greenhouse gas emissions would be saved with each strategy, city partners, and then local community partners, how much things would cost potentially, timelines and estimated framework for all that stuff, and like sort of like the timeline for years it would take to finalize a strategy. So I can send this out to everybody, and then we can build off of that, so we don't have to do too much baseline research, but I think we still need some extra local research. But that'll get us started, I think. Should,
Great, it'll be a good reference.
yeah, I think so.
I want to thank everybody for working through this together. I know we're missing a few volunteers and a couple of committee members, so we'll have to catch them up, but I feel like we made a lot of progress and people have a better idea of where we're headed on some of these activities.
Thanks to you two for framing it so well.
Great, thank you.
And Jess.
So I wanted to move to the next agenda item, city council update planning. I think we were talking about middle of July, and then you.
Correct. And I sent both of you so there's some discussion at the last meeting of when would be the best time to give some type of presentation to the council. I wasn't certain what the timeline was for the city council regarding the CIP. So this is just done by month. There aren't any set dates on all of these. But just so everyone knows, in August is going to be the city council CIP work session. The date's not set for that yet. In September, the 20th is going to be the deadline for citizen request submissions. That's the date which was missed last time, then the council gave an extension to members of this committee. The department submission deadline will be September 27th. And then the CIP citizen request meeting, which is where I believe 3 members of the city council heard the requests from citizens and they got an opportunity to speak to them. That will be in October, date's not determined yet. And then during the month of November will be a joint work session between the city council and the planning board. Public hearing with the city council and the planning board. And then in late November, the planning board will go ahead and vote to recommend. And then there's several other dates after that. Adoption of the CIP ideally would be December 2nd. So the best time, I think, to present may be in August. That's when the city council will have their work session itself. I'm not saying give a presentation at the work session, although there will be a public comment for people to speak. But maybe in August, that should be our goal at one of those city council meetings to actually give a presentation. And then we could just stay on top of it at all these other meetings, because these other meetings will have public comments.
And your option for communicating with the city council would be for us to do a presentation.
Correct. I
In
think it would
August,
be useful to have someone speak. There doesn't have to be slides. Those slides sometimes do help. There could be more information in the packet itself, but if an item's just put in the packet, it will get less attention from anyone who's attending the meeting other than city councilors, because people don't realize there is a packet with information in it.
Right.
And just because it's in the packet doesn't mean that people are going to have questions after reviewing it. But if you're actually standing there talking about it, so I think it would be
Right.
helpful to have one person, usually less people are better, give a brief presentation on what the thoughts are, and then there'd be more people that answer specific questions.
Right. Comments about that? Looking at August, looking at a presentation from this committee.
So Josh, when you say one of the city council's meetings, that's every week or
So
bi-weekly?
it's the first and third Monday of every month. Almost. If
Mhm.
there's a holiday that falls on a Monday, the meeting will be on a Tuesday. In November, there's usually just one meeting. And during one of the summer months, I don't know if it's June or July, there's just one city council meeting.
Mhm.
So the dates of the city council in August are up there, August 4th and August 18th.
Fastest years.
I do not know. And I guess it doesn't make a difference if we aim to present on either August 4th or August 18th, because we'll have a committee meeting before August 4th, and our next committee meeting won't be till after August 8th. So days in August.
Good.
And we have the guidelines that the committee developed, and we had,
Are those still up on the website?
I think so. Oh,
Yeah.
And the rules and regulations will be out of legal, I hope. And we'll have some of these actions further along. So I think we'll have enough to present by August. So. Any comments about that? Questions? Let's go to community engagement.
So I can speak to the sustainability fair. I think most of you were there with the exception of Colin, who was sick. And Kate, I don't think you were able, unfortunately, but that's okay. You were both missed. So our final count is we believe we had roughly 1,000 people come through the door. What?
Is that the record?
That is the record, and we have been consistent every year growing. Right now, we're starting pre-planning for next year, so we're just getting some feedback from everybody who exhibited and participated about what worked for them, what didn't, what they might like to see next year.
Kate, could you put the pictures? Oh, thank you.
Yeah. I don't know if any of you have any feedback about the day or the event, but it seemed like people really enjoyed themselves and yeah.
Yeah, people had a great time.
I think there was one booth that was pretty outstanding that raised some money that they were gonna
$11.
to donate to an Arbor Day organization. And then they changed their mind because they were flexible and good thinkers, and they decided to buy trees themselves and plant it. So we're talking about real soil actions
Action.
taking place as an outcome of the fair.
Oh, and there is a picture inside the whale. I forgot.
Oh, wow,
That's
I thought I-
beautiful.
that's
Huh?
cool.
Didn't submit
The
that.
ribs.
That's his heart.
I was inside the way.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
That's
There's a
Nice.
tree. Some
Oh, great.
EV. Almost EVs, leftist marching band,
Wow.
Blue Ocean.
Inside.
What's his name?
Ladder. Ladder the
The whale
whale.
name?
Okay, there's the competition,
Still. Okay, yeah.
former competition.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
That
So-
one thing I thought was maybe different than past years was more representation from outside of Portsmouth,
Which is,
their communities.
yep, which is part of the goal is to really make it more of a regional
neat.
event. We've started calling it the Seacoast Sustainability Fair, and one of the people on the committee for planning and organizing is the chair of Kittery Can. So we're trying to make it, yep. And I think you had somebody too, but I had a couple people who approached me and just asked how we did it. And they were interested in hosting them in their communities or maybe collaborating with ours next year. Yep.
Exeter, somebody from Exeter.
Yeah, Exeter was one of them. Yep.
And I have to say, the lion's share of the work was done by our own Jessica Plasker.
Yeah, nice job.
Team effort.
And I would like to say, by the conversation of planning an activity that gets a different audience. By bringing in the whale, I was very delighted and impressed to see the families with young kids who weren't there last year, I don't think, who came this year. So there's, I think, your thinking on that, it worked. And that's the kind of thinking, I think, Colleen, you're talking about,
Mhm.
specific activity that gets a new audience out.
The whale has to come back next year.
Right,
Nah.
yes.
Start
You-
petitioning, yeah.
Must be hard for them to have a space to fit that. That's huge, 65 feet long.
Yeah. Yeah. And food fell apart because they had a gas leak, but hopefully we'll figure out food better next year. So Reds was supposed to be there, but then one of their gas lines was leaking, so they couldn't make it that last one.
So that's it for community engagement. And I put other committee business because it seems like things come up now and then. We talked at the beginning of the meeting about not having a student rep. And because we don't have an assigned name for that position on this committee, we counted a quorum without that position.
Last week, okay.
Okay,
Mhm.
so check this with Josh. There are 13 people on the committee, named people.
Okay.
There's a position for a student, that would make it 14. So do we count as 13 or 14?
The position for a student should count as not being filled when it goes towards a quorum. That makes sense.
So
Not
how does
towards-
that work? So so it doesn't.
So if it's 14, regardless if the position is filled, my understanding is regardless if someone's there to represent the school board or the school students themselves, they should still count as being required towards the quorum.
So we have 13 people on the committee, named people, with a 14th being a student rep. So that means a quorum should be 8.
Yes.
Okay.
I think that makes sense, because I think you think of it as like seats.
Yeah.
Then
There's
there's,
people here tonight.
There's also the DPW representative, which we haven't filled since
Are
Brian.
they a seat?
No. Oh,
They're not
there's
on the
just
list?
one city staff.
In the
person.
ordinance.
Oh, it is.
No,
Oh.
Oh, it's not?
there's one city councillor, one school board member, one member of city staff, one student, and then 7 to 11 community members.
Okay, then we will take
So
that.
I
off
was
the website.
confused last month, so I wrote it down.
Okay, so we just gotta take that off the website.
Oh, it says NA. I didn't think, oh, because the term.
Cause
Oh, but it's on the website. Oh, I see.
'Cause
So
there-
is
there
that,
one-
did that
Oh,
change?
that's, huh.
Did we change
I
that? Was
think
that one of
that's
the ones?
only there because we had someone from Public Works attending. So they were listed that way,
Oh.
since they're no longer,
But
that
it
was
was-
never in the ordinance.
was never
that's the
official.
only
Okay.
point. Should we include that? Should we include some?
Oh, that's good to know.
We have someone from health too.
But that's not in the ordinance, that's just someone
Right.
from health.
Yep, Kristen's been coming.
Josh, so a follow-up question. The new ordinance was passed by the council and everything,
Correct.
but it won't be in the books for a little while.
Yeah, it will likely take some time to be.
Okay.
I don't know how long that takes.
But it's in effect.
It's in effect.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, good. I am going to have to be absent next month, so I'm saying it now.
What's the date next month?
May 22nd. But I'm sure you'll have a quorum without me.
Do you have who's facilitating and who's making notes?
I don't.
Did it just say that Effie was facilitating? How I was thinking it was.
That was for
That's
the
the
meeting.
day.
Oh, okay.
But you've done so well.
Are we going with volunteers now?
We had the schedule, but it sounds like
Every fall.
nobody's able to follow.
Oh, it's good.
Okay,
Yeah.
is the schedule online?
I think it was internal. It was sent to everyone by email. I can try to find it, but it might take me a while. Oh.
Here for that.
Um,
I'm not gonna do it for that. Just shut down.
It might be something I
It's the
send out
Thursday
tomorrow.
before Memorial Day weekend. So maybe we could get a couple of volunteers.
Yeah.
I'm just thinking other people might.
Yeah.
Do you do it like you did before? How did they get assigned? Did they, does the minute taker become the presenter?
That's the way
Uh,
it's been.
Are you gonna?
Other
pick
direction,
Other direction?
facilitator
So
becomes
I would
another,
become a
yeah.
minute taker. So can someone volunteer to be a minute taker next month?
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And then facilitating.
Kate has the list. Maybe she can send it
Okay.
out.
Who
Oh, yeah, I
hasn't,
can send.
who
Okay,
hasn't done
okay.
it for a while? If you're stuck, I could do it, but I did it a couple months ago.
Sure,
the
yeah.
same.
I mean, who hasn't done it in a while? Tori, Chaz, but Tori won't be here. She doesn't think.
Josh is
until
supposed to be the facilitator next month.
Summer.
Am I?
Oh,
Okay.
Oh, you found it.
Oh, good.
Great.
And the note taker?
You,
Oh, okay, so,
I took care of that.
yeah,
I can do that, yeah.
You got your
Okay.
fill in.
good.
All right.
Thank you for asking, Bert. We
That
have
worked.
Josh facilitating and Rian taking minutes. So I think that's it. If someone wants to say anything.
Can I just, and this might be already on people's radar, but, in terms of zero waste plan, there was that whole reusable Seacoast pilot study for how to make things happen. So if you haven't read it, it might be of interest. Also, just for y'all sustainability nerds, it might be of interest, even if you're not a zero waste person.
Colleen, could you send it to
Yes,
Kate? And then
yes.
Kate could share it with the committee.
Yeah,
That'd
I
be
think-
great.
I think Kristen actually sent it to me this morning, so I can definitely
Good.
send it around to everybody too.
So do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second,
Second,
all in favor?
I-
All opposed?